My name is Naomi Ellis. I was the first child, the eldest daughter, the one who sat quietly at dinner while others laughed too loud and spilled their drinks, the one who set the table, who cleaned it afterward, who folded the towels just the way my mother liked even, though she never once said thank you. I was always there, and yet I was never seen. It started small. Little things. My brother would forget my birthday and my mother would shrug. Boys will be boys. I once got accepted into a writing competition, placed third in the state, and my father said, "That's nice," before changing the subject to my cousin's new job in finance. I was never the one anyone bragged about. Never the one anyone asked about first. I was the background character in my own home. Growing up, I thought maybe I just needed to try harder. So I did. I did everything they said a good daughter should. I stayed out of trouble, got good grades, came home on time, helped my little brother with his homework even when he teased me to tears. I was the one who remembered everyone's favorite cake, who stayed late at family gatherings to help clean, while others left with their arms full of leftovers. But it didn't matter. No matter how quietly I worked or how loudly I ached, I was never enough to be truly noticed. I remember once was 15 coming downstairs in a new dress for a family dinner. I had saved for weeks to buy it. It was soft blue, like the sky before dusk, and it made me feel beautiful, like someone new. I stood in the doorway, hoping for a glance, maybe even a smile from my mother, but she didn't look up. My father just asked if I could grab the wine glasses from the hutch. No one said a word about the dress. I went to the bathroom that night and cried into a washcloth. That's when I learned the art of silence. Not just the kind where you don't speak, but the kind where you don't expect. Where you stop reaching for approval, because every time you do, it cuts your hand open. I thought things would change as I got older, that maybe adulthood would bring understanding, that they'd see who I had become and want to know me again. But that's the thing about people who only see you when they need something. They don't recognize your strength when you build it for yourself. When I moved out at 23, no one helped me pack. No one offered to drive the truck or bring a meal. My brother asked if I was finally giving up on being the favorite. I laughed like it was a joke, but inside it stung. I wasn't trying to be the favorite. I was just trying to matter. Years passed, we had the occasional call. Birthdays were missed. Holidays were offered, but always in a way that made it seem like I was the one who didn't care. They said I was distant, hard to reach, overly sensitive. But they never once asked why I pulled away. Never once looked at their own hands to see if they were the ones letting go. And then, the house, the one we grew up in. The one with the crooked stairs and the pear tree in the backyard. The one where my mother once stitched curtains by hand and my father painted the porch every spring. That house. They were going to rebuild it, restore it, bless it with a traditional family ceremony, something sacred and symbolic. And they invited everyone, cousins I hadn't seen in years, my brother's college roommate, even the neighbor down the street who once borrowed sugar and never returned the container. But not me. I found out by accident. 2 days before the ceremony, I was on the phone with my Aunt Diane, one of the few relatives who ever asked how I was doing. She mentioned being excited for Saturday for the house blessing, and I paused. What blessing? That's when the truth cracked through. She assumed I knew. Of course I would be invited. I was the eldest child, the daughter. It's the one who always knew the right prayers, who helped light the candles when Grandma was still alive. Of course I'd be there. Except I wasn't. I called my mother, calmly, carefully. I asked her why I hadn't been invited. Her response was quiet, flat, as if she were commenting on the weather. It didn't feel right for you to be there. You've distanced yourself from us anyway. And just like that, the floor of my stomach dropped out. Distance, that word again. As if I had built a wall and locked myself away from them for no reason. As if they hadn't spent years pushing me further and further with every missed glance, every forgotten moment, every word left unsaid. I could have yelled. I could have begged. I could have cried down the phone, but I didn't. Instead, I hung up, sat with the ache, and began to write. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. That surprised even me. That surprised even me. But when you've lived your whole life trying to be heard and never quite breaking through, silence becomes your second skin. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from my untouched tea. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. That familiar rhythm reminding me time was still moving forward, even as I sat completely still. I wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. I think they were tired. I think I was too, so I opened my laptop. I didn't know what I was going to say yet, only that I needed to say something. Not to change their minds or beg for a seat at the table, but to put into words what had been swelling inside me for years. The first few sentences were clumsy. I deleted them and started again. Then again. Finally, I stopped trying. To make it sound polished, stopped trying to sound calm or composed or mature. Just told the truth. I started the letter with what I knew would surprise them most. Thank you. Because, in a strange way, I meant it. Thank you for teaching me how to carry loneliness like a coat. I could drape over my shoulders and still walk tall. Thank you for showing me how to listen to my own voice. After being ignored for so long, thank you for teaching me that love, when given conditionally, is not love at all, and that I deserve more than crumbs. I wrote it plainly. Not poetically, not wrapped in bitterness, just honestly. I told them what it felt like to be erased from my own family story. To be treated like a guest in the house I helped clean and care for. I reminded them of the time I stayed up all night, helping plan my brother's graduation party. And no one mentioned my name when they gave the thank you toast, of the way they always assumed. I'd be the one to watch the younger cousins at weddings while everyone else danced. Of how even in my adulthood, I was still expected to show up, stay quiet, smile pretty, and leave with nothing. I didn't call them cruel. I didn't accuse them of hatred. That would have made it too easy for them to deny. I simply painted the picture they'd spent years ignoring, but there was one part of the letter they'd never see coming. I attached a document to the back. It was simple. 3 pages, signed, notarized, legal. The house they were about to bless, it didn't belong to them. Not anymore. It belonged to me. My grandmother, my mother's mother, had quietly transferred the title to me before she passed. She did it in her soft-spoken way, slipping it into a conversation during one of our tea dates at her old apartment. Back when her fingers trembled, but her words didn't. You know, Naomi, she had said, patting my hand with that fragile grace she carried even in her final months. They don't see you, but I do. I always have. At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. I just smiled and nodded, thinking it was another one of her cryptic blessings. But a few weeks after her funeral, a letter arrived from her. Lawyer, inside was a deed. My name on it. The house, it wasn't about money or power. It wasn't even about the house, really. It was about someone finally saying, I see what they've done. I know who you are, and I trust you with what they took for granted for 2 years. I never told anyone. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me thought maybe one day I'd sit them down and explain. That I'd use it as a way to start fresh. But that hope had died long before the ceremony. I wasn't invited to, so I included it with the letter, not out of revenge. Not to humiliate, but to draw a line. I printed the letter, folded it carefully, placed it in a cream-colored envelope, and sealed it with a single piece of tape. I didn't decorate it, didn't write a message on the outside. I addressed it in neat handwriting to my parents' home, the same home they were about to gather in, the same home they believed still belonged to them then, without a second thought. I walked to the mailbox at the end of my street and slid it in. The metal door shut with a quiet thunk. It was done. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt still for the first time in my life. I wasn't asking to be let in. I was simply stepping out and closing the door behind me, The morning of the ceremony came like any other. A soft sky, warm wind, ordinary, and yet I knew that somewhere else back in the house I used to dust. The house where my baby brother once lost his first tooth in the hallway, carpet, everything was about to shift. They didn't know yet. The letter had arrived late the night before. I tracked it. I paid for express shipping, not out of impatience, but precision. It had been delivered at 9:43 p.m. I imagined it landing on their doorstep under porch light. My father picking it up, with the day's junk mail, not knowing that something inside would shake the ground beneath. Their carefully arranged chairs and white tablecloths. I didn't go. Of course, IDIDN single quotes T. Instead, I made pancakes. Real ones, fluffy and imperfect, not from a box. I lit a candle in the quiet, sat at my small kitchen table, the same one where I'd written that letter days before. I took a deep breath and let it settle. Somewhere just a few hours away, they were preparing the garden, folding chairs in rows, stringing paper lanterns between trees. My mother would be directing things with her usual clipped authority. My father would be checking the music playlist, pretending not to notice the tension when people asked, "Naomi's not coming." And I would be here, watching the sunlight fall through the curtains, waiting for the silence. It came. Around 11 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not with a call, just a text from my cousin Clara. "Naomi, what did you do?" I stared at it, heart still. There it was, the crack in the wall. I didn't reply. 20 minutes later, a missed call from my mother. Then another, then my father, then my brother. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to, because I already knew what was happening. I could picture it clearly the moment they opened that envelope. Maybe my mother opened it first, standing in the kitchen, sipping her tea and flipping through the mail like it was nothing. She would have seen my handwriting and paused. Maybe even said my name out loud. Naomi, K? Maybe she smiled, thinking I'd sent a last-minute note, a peace offering, a change of heart. But then she would have opened it, read the first few lines, her face falling slowly at first, then faster by the time she got to the last page. I imagined she sat down, not out of shock, but the weight of understanding that house their pride. Their inheritance, the stage for this grand family restoration, was no longer theirs to claim, legally, logically, quietly mine. I hadn't taken anything. I'd just reminded them what was already true. When the ceremony began, I imagine it felt strange. The kind of strange no one names but everyone feels. Guests still arrived, still smiled, still passed plates of food and glasses of lemonade. But something hung in the air like heavy dust uncertainty. Had they told anyone? Had they continued the blessing like nothing had changed? Or had they paused on, wondered how it had come to this? I wasn't there to see the discomfort, the side glances, the questions whispered between bites of chicken salad. But I know families. I know mine. And I know what happens when truth arrives uninvited. It doesn't shout, it sits in the corner. And everyone pretends not to look at it until they have to. Around 2 p.m., Clara texted again. "They're freaking out. Your mom looks like she saw a ghost." I almost laughed. Not out of cruelty, but disbelief that it had finally happened. That after years of being ignored, explained away, and stepped over, the quiet daughter had spoken loudest of all. Not through a tantrum, but a title deed. I turned off my phone for the rest of the day. I read a book I'd been meaning to finish. I repotted a plant. I played a record that reminded me of slow Sunday mornings at Grandma's house, the kind before the world started expecting too much of me. I didn't check my phone again till after dark. 6 missed calls, 9 unread messages, 2 voicemails I didn't listen to. And not one of them said, "I'm sorry." They said, "Why didn't you tell us?" They said, "You blindsided us." They said, "How could you do this?" Because even now was easier to paint me as the one who struck back than to see me as the one who had simply had enough. They didn't ask what it had taken. For me to reach this point, they didn't ask how it felt to be forgotten, or what it meant to be remembered only when convenient. And that was the clearest confirmation of all. That the letter, the silence, the decision to stay away wasn't cruelty. It was clarity, and sometimes the deepest form of love for yourself is knowing when not to show up. When I think of all the people who have ever looked at I looked at Mir, can only think of one dot. My grandmother, not the kind of grandmother who baked cookies or wore floral perfume. No, she was sharp, precise, always in a pressed blouse, her silver hair pulled back tight. She didn't coddle, didn't praise unless it meant something. She called things what they were, not what people wanted them to be. And somehow that made her the only one who ever made me feel safe. Her name was Miriam Ellis, and when she spoke, Q listened. She didn't live with us. She had her own little apartment 2 towns over, with heavy curtains and a balcony that overlooked a sad patch of garden she swore used to bloom better. I used to visit her once a month, sometimes more when I needed air. I never told anyone how. Often I went. It felt like hours. It's a hidden corner of the world where I could just be. No performing, no waiting to be called on, no pretending I wasn't hurt. She never asked why I looked so tired. She already knew. Instead, she'd offer me tea always, the same kind, chamomile with honey, and we'd sit. I'd talk about work, books I was reading, how my little apartment had a leaky faucet again. And sometimes I wouldn't talk at all, just sit. She never minded. She understood that silence could speak too. One afternoon, just a few months before she passed, she said something I never forgot. You know, Naomi, your mother always wanted things neat, perfect, just like the living room where no one was allowed to sit. I laughed softly, remembering that ridiculous space. White couch no one touched, glass figurines we couldn't breathe on. A museum inside a home. She learned that from me, Grandma continued, but I unlearned it. She didn't? I looked at her, then her weathered hands folded in her lap, her eyes steady on mine. She saw the confusion on my face. She was always so focused on how things looked, how the family appeared from the outside. But you've always been concerned with how things feel, okay? And that's harder to carry. That stayed with me. She saw the difference between how I moved through the world and how my mother did. Between performing love and living it. When she got sick, she didn't tell many people. That was her way. She didn't like a fuss. But I knew something was changing. She moved slower. Her hands, once so firm, began to tremble. She started repeating stories, sometimes forgetting where she was in the middle of a sentence. But her eyes, those never faded. They stayed sharp. As ever, I remember our last visit. She was sitting on the balcony in her wool cardigan, a blanket over her legs, even though it was spring. I brought lemon cake from a bakery she used to love. We talked about nothing for a while. Then she turned to me and, out of nowhere, she said, "Naomi, I need you to do something for me." "Of course," I said, without thinking. "There's a folder. It's good, take it. Don't open it here. Take it. Don't open it here." I nodded slowly. "What's in it?" "Something that belongs to you," she said. "Something I want you to have. Don't tell the others." I remember how heavy that sentence felt. Don't tell the others. She trusted me with that. She trusted me, period. That night, I took the folder home. I didn't open it until after midnight, sitting on the floor of my bedroom like a child with a secret. And inside, I found it. The deed to the family house. Transferred to my name, signed, notarized, dated almost a year before. There was no letter, no explanation, just a single post-it note on the first page in her handwriting. "Because you see the cracks and you still chose to stay kind." I stared at that for a long time. I cried. Not because I wanted the house, but because for the first time in my life, someone had chosen me. Not because I asked, not because I needed help. but because they saw me. She didn't give me the house out of anger. She didn't do it to hurt my mother or to punish the rest of the family. She did it the way she did everything, with quiet clarity. She knew what that house meant. She knew what it cost me to walk through its rooms as the invisible daughter. And she wanted it to be mine, not as a prize, but as peace. When she died, the family mourned loudly. They spoke of how much they loved her, how wise she was, clung to her memory like it was something sacred. But they never knew. What she left behind, they never asked, and I never told them. The first call I answered came 3 days after the ceremony. I don't know why I picked up. Maybe curiosity. Maybe I wanted to hear how they'd say it, how they'd try to twist it into something that wasn't their fault. It was my brother. Matthew, he didn't waste time. Naomi, what the hell were you thinking? Not hello, not how are you. Not even a breath to check the temperature in my voice. Just that. I sat back in my chair, looking out the window. The neighborhood kids were playing on the sidewalk, their laughter loud and free. I said slowly that the truth deserves a seat at the table, even if I'm not at it. He scoffed. You could have told us. You blindsided everyone. Blindsided, the word again. It kept echoing in the messages I ignored. Like I'd pulled some cruel stunt instead of simply revealing what was already real. Like the problem wasn't how they erased me, but that I didn't warn them before I put the mirror up. I didn't tell you. I said, because it was never about you. That stopped him. I could hear him breathing on the line, then shifting, uncomfortable. You know, Mom's devastated, he said, as if that would move me. Is she? Yes. Is she devastated because she hurt me? Or because I finally stopped letting her pretend she didn't? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew. The next day, a text from my mother. I'm sorry if you felt excluded. That wasn't our intention. I read it 3 times. If you felt as if my pain were hypothetical. As if their actions didn't happen unless I could prove. They did no admission, no apology, just damage control. That was the thing about my family. They had a remarkable ability to float just above accountability. Everything was vague, blurred, lost in memory. That's not how we remember it. You're being too sensitive. We never meant to make you feel that way. But what they meant and what they did never lined up. And for once, I wasn't going to pretend that was okay. I didn't respond to my mother's message. Later that night, my father called. I let it ring. Then, on the 4th try, I answered. He was quieter than Matthew. Always had been. Not absent, but passive. The kind of man who let things happen, then nodded at the aftermath. Double quotes, "Hi, sweetheart," he said. That word used to make my chest tighten with hope. Not anymore. Hi, I read the letter and the papers. Your grandmother, ... She never told us. She didn't need to. Silence. She trusted you, he said, like he was still trying to make sense of it. I didn't reply. She always said you were steady, observant. I didn't realize how far things had gone. They didn't go far. They just stayed the same. I finally stopped pretending that was fine. He let out a breath. Your mom's not taking it well, not responsible for her feelings. Anymore, that landed hard. I could feel it through the phone. He started to say something else but stopped. Then softly, almost like a confession. She always had a hard time with emotions. You were a lot like her mother. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Maybe that's why it was hard to be close. I almost laughed. So she punished me for the resemblance. No, I mean, I don't know what I mean. There it was. Even now, faced with the truth in ink and legal standing, he couldn't say it plain. Couldn't look it in the face and say, we failed you. That's what I wanted. Not a dramatic apology, not flowers or tears, just honesty. Just someone, anyone, saying, we hurt you. And you didn't deserve it. But they couldn't give me that. They could only offer confusion. Guilt framed as surprise. Pity dressed up as remorse. The worst apology came from my cousin Clara. A voice note she meant well. She always had. But that made it sting more. I just feel so sad for everyone, she said. It didn't have to be this way. We're all broken now. I wish you had talked to me first. I could have helped fix it. Fix it as if I were a problem to be patched up and smoothed over. As if the cracks in the family's foundation hadn't been there for decades, long before the ceremony. The letter, the house. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I had spent enough of my life explaining myself to people who only ever heard what they wanted to. Some part of me hoped deep down that one of them might really see it. Not just the house, not just the legal twist, but the pain, the years, the quiet girl in the corner who kept showing up. Even when it hurt, but no one did. They just wanted me to put it back in the box, and I had no intention of doing that, people. Keep asking me if I regret it. If I regret not calling first, if I regret mailing the letter, if I regret starting a fire that split the family down the middle. But here's the truth. I keep quietly holding in my chest. I didn't burn the bridge. They just never built one for me. I used to think family was something unbreakable, bloodbound, sacred. I clung to that idea like a child clutches a fading comfort blanket, even when it no longer kept me warm. I kept showing up. I kept trying to cross the invisible space between me and them. But bridges require effort from both sides. And for years, I was the only one building, reaching, mending, forgiving without apology. Loving without being loved back in full. They called my silence distance, my boundaries cold, my absence an attack. But they never stopped to ask why I left. It wasn't a single moment. It was every moment. A collection of small betrayals, unspoken slights, forgotten birthdays, praise withheld. Love rationed. It was showing up to the family cookout and realizing no one saved me a plate. It was being asked to take the group photo never. To be in it, it was watching everyone mourn Grandma and pretend they knew her the way I did. When they couldn't even name the tea she drank every morning, I didn't walk away bitter. I walked away tired, tired of explaining why. I mattered, tired of hoping someone would finally remember I was in the room. They say I changed. Maybe I did. Maybe healing looks like change when you're used to someone shrinking. But didn't become hard. I became whole. And sometimes becoming whole means leaving behind the people who only loved the broken version of you. The first time I walked back into the house after it became mine, I stood in the doorway for a long time, not because I was overwhelmed with pride or triumph, but because I didn't recognize it. It was the same front door I'd walked through 1,000 times. Same hallway, same creaky floorboard near the stairs. But something felt ... hollow, as if the echoes of the past had been waiting for me to return. And I felt all of them, every version of me that ever lived in that house. The little girl who tiptoed past her parents' arguments. The teenager who ate dinner in silence while everyone talked over her. The young woman who left quietly, packing her bags without fanfare. They were still here. Not haunting the space, just lingering. Like breath on a mirror, I wandered from room to room. Each one held a memory I didn't ask to remember. The living room, where I wasn't allowed to speak during grown-up conversations. The kitchen, where my mother once told me I ruined everything. It's over burnt rice. The upstairs hallway where I cried the night I overheard them laughing about how serious I always was. It wasn't a house full of screams or slamming doors. It was a house full of silence. Careful silences. Loaded silences. And now it was mine, not to erase the past, but to reclaim it. I didn't want to change everything. I didn't rush to paint the walls or replace the furniture. I just sat for a while in the stillness, and something inside me shifted. This house had held me in pain, but now it would hold me in peace. Not because it was healed, but because I finally was. The people who loved me rarely said it out loud. Not the kind of love you see in movies or family cards signed with hearts and flourishes. No. The love I received came in softer shapes. My grandmother's quiet nod as I spoke. A friend who texted to ask if I'd eaten that day. A neighbor who noticed when I disappeared for too long and left fresh bread on my porch without a note. There was a time I used to mistake loudness for love. The grand gestures, the big words, the gatherings with laughter echoing off walls I never felt welcome in. But loud doesn't mean lasting. And loud certainly doesn't mean kind. It took me years to understand that the people who made the most noise weren't always the ones who truly saw me. My family's love, when it existed, came with conditions, expectations, roles I was supposed to play without question. But the ones who loved me quietly, they never asked me to shrink. They never needed me to explain my silence. They didn't pull me in to fix me. They stood beside me while I found my own ground. And when everything with the house exploded, those same quiet people stayed. They didn't demand a side. They didn't press for details. They just asked if I was okay, that was all. And maybe that's what I needed all along. Not forgiveness from the ones who broke me, but faith from the ones who didn't. I used to think love had to be earned. Now I know. Real love recognizes you as you are and stays, even in the quiet. Sometimes I wonder who they talk about now when they say my name. Do they still picture the girl who always said yes? The one who cleaned up quietly, who never raised her voice even when she was breaking inside? Or do they finally see the woman who stopped showing up when being present meant being invisible? I doubt it. Families like mine hold on to old versions of you because it's easier than accepting who you've become without their approval. In their minds, I'm probably still the bitter one, the cold one, the daughter who changed. And you know what? They're right. I did. I'm not the same Naomi who waited for a seat at the table. I'm not the girl who measured her worth and how often her name was remembered. I no longer accept love that comes only when easy to handle. I no longer beg for crumbs from hands that once fed everyone but me. Yes. I changed because silence can only protect you for so long before it starts to suffocate you. Because surviving a family that doesn't see you forces you to become your own witness. They don't like this version of me. This woman who knows her boundaries. This woman who doesn't flinch when they go quiet. But I like her. I trust her. She's the one who mailed the letter. She's the one who walked into the house not to take revenge, but to take her place. She's the one who finally realized you don't need permission to stop being who they prefer. You only need the courage to become who you are. And, Kide, people keep saying I won, that I got the last word, that taking the house was a kind of justice. But I don't feel like I won anything. This wasn't a game. It was grief. Years of being invisible, shrinking myself to fit inside a family that never made room. What I did wasn't about revenge. It was about release. I didn't write that letter to hurt them. I wrote it to finally stop hurting myself. I didn't mail the deed to prove a point. I mailed it to draw a line between who I was and who I would never be again. And now I sit in this house not with pride, but peace. It's quiet here, not the kind of silence I grew up in. It's the one that made me feel small. This is a new kind of quiet, the kind that feels like breathing after holding. In too long, I didn't win. I let go of needing them, of proving myself, of waiting to be loved the right way. And that was freedom.